Well, hello everyone. It's wonderful to be able to connect again on this wonderful Sunday morning. Out here in Southern California, we've had a little rain this week, but this weekend the sun has come out, so it's beautiful weather. Today my presentation is entitled Many Paths, and of course that's day 39 of the Joy of Every Day, the Tao of Joy Every Day. And the subtitle I've chosen for this presentation is One Destination. And one of the things, or the main point really to make in this chapter is the point that Derek makes so well, and that's that when it comes to spirituality, it's important to understand that when it comes to spiritual growth, that there's more than one way to do it. And obviously, as we gather in this Tao study group, all of us in this meeting have chosen the Tao path. And that's largely because we've found that it's best for us. And while I certainly agree that it's best for me, and I'm sure it's best for all of us who connect and who practice the Tao teachings, but it's also important to remember that not everyone necessarily will identify with the path that we've chosen. But it's important to remember that because the Tao encompasses everything, that other spiritual paths, other traditions, other spiritual traditions, all have the same goal of getting to the one destination. And, you know, in our practice, our spiritual practice, we might refer to that as the ultimate enlightenment, which as a matter of faith, you know, I certainly believe that we're all destined to get there one day. And so once that happens, once we all, and when I say all, I mean like all sentient beings reach that point, it really doesn't matter which path we took when we started that journey, because in the end, we all get to that one destination, which is why I chose that subtitle, Many Paths, One Destination. But before I get into that, we'll do a quick review of last week, day 38. And the day 38 was entitled The Best Time to Learn. And what we talked about was, while we can learn from the past, it is important to remember that we cannot learn in the past. So learning is something that's very much for the present. So while we can learn from the past and we can plan for the future, the actual learning, in order to do that, you have to be present in the present, so to speak. And, you know, we talked about how we should not regret that we did not discover the Tao teaching sooner, or and this goes for anyone on any spiritual path, right? Whatever spiritual path works to help you reach understanding on a spiritual level, no one should fret that they didn't find it soon enough, because, you know, the Tao has its own timetable, or maybe I should say generally spirituality has its own timetable, and there are karmic mechanisms that are beyond our comprehension. In fact, when it really comes to karma, it's really best to only focus on our own in a way, and realize that we create our own karma through our own actions, and to be cognizant of that so that we can act correctly at the right times. And of course, by having faith in the process and practicing awareness, we begin to recognize the learning opportunities we have as they manifest in the course of our lives, as we live day to day. And of course, when we take notice of what's going on in the present, the availability of that continuous learning process becomes more and more apparent to us. And as Derek stated so clearly in that chapter, the master will only appear when the student is ready. The Tao has a way of working karmic affinity into things so that you encounter the people that help you on your spiritual path as you go along. And similarly, you may be the person who, is in a place to help others at the right time. And all of that happens because of this amazing thing that we simply call the Tao. This simple thing that encompasses everything, brings those opportunities to learn and to be present for each other and to connect on its own timetable in its own way. And it is beyond our comprehension. So in a sense, it is a matter of faith. But as Bill often says, when you practice the Tao teachings, they're so time tested. It's like a mathematical certainty that if you practice those teachings, you'll end up in the right places at the right times to fulfill the destiny. And ultimately, it's the destiny that we all get to choose. So as I said last week, as long as there is air in our lungs and blood flowing in our hearts, it'll never be too late to learn. It'll never be too late to walk the path. And so now we go on to today's presentation. As I said, day 39, many paths. And the picture I've chosen here is a model train set that someone has put together, and you can see that there are 4 different tracks there. And some of them may veer off in different ways, but the idea being that in the end, those trains all end up in the stations of life that we find ourselves in. And that really, even though there's this tendency towards an illusion of separateness, especially when it comes to religion. Unfortunately, it's sort of wired in human beings to sort of be somewhat tribal. We naturally look for patterns, and oftentimes, especially when it comes to religion, instead of focusing on the similarities, we have a tendency to focus on the differences. And the other thing that can often happen is people sometimes have the tendency to inflict judgment on points of view that are different from their own. And that, of course, creates separation. But really, all those perceived differences really are illusions. Because when you're talking about many paths, it is many paths, but at the same time, there's a oneness there. Yes, of course, there's many, many religions in the spiritual traditions of this world that we live in here on Earth. And regardless of whether someone's Christian or Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist, those are just the major ones, of course, are Judaism too. But regardless of those major religions, there's, even within them, in those religions, there are many different sects and so forth. But in the end, those different paths, ultimately, what we have to remember is that there's a oneness that connects us all. I mean, in a true sense, there really is one spirituality that we all get to, that we all will get to. And, different strokes for different folks, in a sense, is really true. The way, as each of us is an individual, so the way we relate to things can be different. You'll find individuals in your life who are like-minded or who are very similar to you. And that's a good thing. We can fellowship that way and share our similar views. But at the same time, we shouldn't limit ourselves only to that. We're here to connect with everyone. There's a oneness that exists beyond, that connects all living beings. And it's that connection that's so important. Even though sometimes it's not obvious, it's always there, regardless of what path someone may have chosen. So, as I alluded to a little bit, oftentimes when it comes to spirituality, many people often tend to have one-track minds. There's a tendency to believe that the best path for them should also be the best path for everyone. And in the interest of full disclosure, let me share with you that I certainly will freely admit that I've been very guilty of this myself in my own life, to very much detriment, really. I used to let my feelings about spirituality and the larger questions in life, or maybe as Derek put it in this chapter, the ultimate question of life, really. Well, what is the purpose of all of this? I used to let my answer to that question that I always felt was right for me should be right for everyone. And I was married so much to that idea, really, that I darn near destroyed a relationship between someone I truly loved. But fortunately, thanks to Derek and to Bill and the teachings that they share in these Sunday Tao study groups, I was opened up to the idea that there isn't just one way to get there, and that what's right for me isn't necessarily right for everyone. Even someone very close to me, someone who I grew up with, someone who I loved. And that person was my sister. My sister is a Christian, and that's the path that works for her. And there's nothing wrong with that path. A month or two ago, Bill gave a presentation. I believe a family member of his had passed away, and he talked about how he went to the services afterwards and the gathering, which is the celebration of the life that was lost. And he talked about how he was among the members of his family that had a strong Christian tradition. And he talked about how accepting they were of him, despite knowing that, he's chosen a very different path than Christianity. And he talked about the peace and the harmony and the decency of the people who gathered to celebrate in that Christian tradition. And it served as a reminder to me of what Bill has taught me in the past. And that's that there's different ways to go forward on the path of life towards a spiritual destination. And that we shouldn't let our different traditions separate us. And it was such a wonderful talk. It stuck with me, and I certainly think of it often. I thought of it this week as I was preparing to give this talk. I thought about how true it is that we should focus on the things that connect us. And those other things that disconnect us, so to speak, really are illusions. They're constructions that we all create in our minds, and then it comes to fruition in the world. If you think about it, everything kind of starts from within us, and then it manifests. But it begins with us. I mean, really, that's what karma is all about. We're always acting, and those actions have consequences that reflect back. Now, fortunately, because of the Tao teachings, I think of specifically the one about the 5 religions, right? The acceptance of all spiritual traditions. It doesn't mean that because you accept them, you have to say, well, that's the one I should walk. No, I think all of us in this meeting realize that the one that we've chosen, the Tao path, Tao spirituality, whether it's practiced in a religious context or a secular one, as I do. That really doesn't matter. What does matter is that we focus on spirituality. We make that component of our life something worth paying attention to. Not that we neglect the physical or the other things in life that we have to do, but that we set some time aside to focus and think about spirituality. And just the fact that we gather together in this meeting, all of us are attempting to do that. And that's, of course, a good thing. So the ultimate question of life that Derek brings up in this chapter can be understood as we walk along our spiritual path. However, it's important to remember that no one spiritual tradition, including ours, has a lock on the only way to achieve that understanding. Bill often makes references when he gives his talks to biblical, the Holy Bible, the scriptures, and the Christian and the Judeo-Christian tradition. And of course, that's no accident. Spiritual truth is spiritual truth regardless of how you relay it. And, some people really get locked into the literalism of things and they use that as a point of separation. But what I always try to do when it comes to the Christian tradition is, yes, I don't literally believe the Bible, but I think there's some metaphorical truth in it. And I think it's the same with all religions. I haven't studied every single one of them, but if I had the time and the ability to do it, I'm sure I could probably find what the spiritual truth is, regardless of the nuts and bolts way it's expressed. We can look for that. And that gives us understanding to realize that there's more than one way to get there. There's more than one way to relate to spiritual truth. And just as we all learn differently, some people are visual learners, some people learn more through listening, some people learn kinesthetically through touching. Regardless of the way that you choose, the important thing is that you do learn, that we do get there, that we do progress. And when we do that, we can begin to fellowship not only with our own members of our own path that we've chosen, but with all people, with all beings. We can connect and understand. And even though we're on separate paths, and say we're still walking to the same top, the same hilltop, or as Derek put it in this chapter, the same mountain. He gave the example of when you're at the peak of a mountain, there's all kinds of different ways to get there. You can take the scenic route, you can go straight up, and every variant in between that. But in the end, once we're all at the top, does it really matter how we got there? And of course, it really doesn't matter. So while there is most likely a path that will tend to be best for each of us, it does not mean that we all have to take the same path. You take the path that's right for you. And of course, with each path, there's different opportunities, different challenges. And we try to select the ones that mesh the best with our way of relating to the world. And that ends up being the best path for us. So as Tao cultivators, we walk together on the spiritual path that we've chosen. But it does not mean that Christians, Muslims, Hindus, or any other faith cannot traverse along a different path that will still lead to the ultimate spiritual destination. We're all here for a reason. And, with the Tao tradition, that reason is one that we choose. But regardless of the specific reasons we choose, there is a spiritual truth that underlies everyone's individual reason. And that's the similarity, the connection that we foster. So I'm going to start to sum it up now, if I can. Just as there are many different paths to reach the summit of a mountain, there are also many different ways to reach a spiritual peak as well. And when we realize and focus on the similarities of the various spiritual traditions in the world, rather than using the differences to create separation, we're able to see how it's the same message, but it's relayed in a different way. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, variety truly is the spice of life. And it's okay that we, together on this earth, have different ways of looking at it and relating to it. And when we stop judging other people, we're able to understand their point of view and relate to it, even though it's not maybe the one that we would choose as the best for us. But we can still understand other people when we try. So, of course, different paths will provide a variety of challenges and benefits, as I said, and a suitable path for one human being is not necessarily the correct path for all human beings. But in the end, regardless of the path chosen, I believe with each lifetime, we get a little closer to that one destination. And as I said before, regardless of how we got there, the important thing is that we got there. And the process of getting there is unique to each of us. And yet we have to remember that the other beings on this planet, even beings that aren't human, are having their process of life as well. They're moving along as well, possibly at different rates, depending on where we are in the process. But ultimately, it is a matter of faith that in the end, we will all get there. And so it's okay that the world is fraught with many paths. We don't have to fight crusades or religious wars, if we think of it that way. If we're just simply accepting of other people's spiritual path and look for the things that join us together, the things that allude to the oneness, that unseen truth of oneness that's always there. If we look for those things, we'll find them. And we'll naturally be more accepting of others. But it doesn't mean we abandon the path that's best for us. We've chosen that one. We know that's right for us. And that's fine. But at the same time, we shouldn't judge others. We should realize that other people relate to spirituality in the way that makes sense to them. And it's a decent thing to be accepting of that and not to try to convert them to what's best for you. Instead, we focus on our own spiritual growth. And part of that is not interfering. A big part of Taoism isn't necessarily what you do, but sometimes it's often about what you don't do. And, oftentimes people have agendas, even if they don't realize they have agendas. They often do. And sometimes the biggest agendas are they're trying to get everyone on the same page as you, when that's not necessarily how it's meant to be. You have to trust those karmic mechanisms. You have to trust the Tao, in a sense, that unseen force that underlies everything that happens. And when we do that, things have a way of working out in the way that they were supposed to, on the Tao's timetable, at the right times in the right places. And we're all along for the ride, maybe on different paths, but we're taking the same ride in a sense, just a different version of it. So Tao cultivators, we understand that we don't have to have the exclusive authority when it comes to spiritual wisdom. Wisdom is wisdom. There's different ways to say things. You can say things in a religious way, in a secular way. You can say things in a Christian way. There's Christian wisdom and Muslim wisdom and Hindu wisdom. Wisdom is wisdom. So Tao cultivators, we try to understand that the separations created between people because of religion, or any other reason, by the way, there are other things that separate us: race, abilities. We can make a laundry list of things that separate us, but those separations really, they're constructs, they're illusions. And what the Tao teachings inform us is that we don't have to do that. We don't have to create those constructs of separation. We can recognize an illusion for an illusion and see what's really there. So in a sense, we are all one, and we are all connected, regardless of the way we choose to walk our spiritual journey through this life, or possibly more than just this life. So once spiritual enlightenment is achieved by all human beings, will it really matter how each of us got there? No, I really don't think it does. So we should remember not to judge the paths that others may be on as incorrect. While we have the right to judge if a particular path is right for us, we should not try to decree what the right path is for others. So today's presentation, Day 39, Many Paths, is really one about connection and acceptance, of realizing that there's more than one way to get there. And what's right for us isn't necessarily right for everyone, and that there's nothing wrong with that. And that we shouldn't interfere with the path that others are on. There's times when our paths will cross each other and we can connect and share some spiritual truth, even if we share it in a different way. As I said, wisdom is wisdom, truth is truth. So, as always now, I just want to offer this invitation. If you've learned from the Tao teachings, perhaps you'll be open to sharing what you have learned with others by presenting on a topic from the Tao perspective. Sharing the Tao insights you have learned with our Tao community has the potential to deepen your understanding and the understanding of others. And of course, when those opportunities arise, there'll be times to fellowship not only with Tao cultivators who also strive to practice and follow the teachings, but often in life you'll encounter other people who will relate the Tao teachings in a different way, maybe in a different context. And of course, you can share what you know with them as well. But the idea is to recognize when it's appropriate to do that in a sort of non-contrived way, making sure that you're not forwarding your personal agenda, but instead truly wanting to share and gain understanding from those other traditions, and possibly sharing what you know to possibly help someone else gain understanding of their own tradition by listening to how you see things. And there's nothing wrong with that. But remember, we're not here to change the world because the world doesn't want to be changed. And the Tao there is a plan. Everything is encompassed of the Tao, and it will come to fruition. That, of course, is a matter of faith. But often it's about letting things unfold naturally, not interfering, knowing when to share and when to connect. So as always, I want to end with a book recommendation, The Tao of Joy Every Day, a great book to use daily to help one study and learn the Tao teachings and put them into action. So there it was, Day 39, Many Paths, One Destination. I want to thank all of you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today. I hope I said something that was of use, and I hope you all have a wonderful Sunday.
Thank you, Alex. That was great. The title of this presentation, Many Paths, occupies a special place in my heart because the very first bookstore where I had a book signing was at a place called the Many Paths Bookstore. And that was a wonderful place. And there's definitely a lot of people out there who recognize the truth in what you're saying, that there are always many paths to get to a particular place. That bookstore, unfortunately, no longer exists in this day of Amazon and ebooks, but I still have warm and fond memories of my time there, signing books, interacting with everyone, the bookstore owners. That was just great. Now, I remember when I began talking about this idea that there are always many paths to lead to a particular place. Initially, at first, I said, well, there are many paths, to go to a particular place like Disneyland. I used Disneyland as my destination, thinking that it would be easily recognizable. Later on, though, I decided against using Disneyland as I talked about it because, Disney, the powerful corporation, may not really want me to do that, and why give them free advertising in the first place? Maybe a more commonplace example. So then I switched from Disneyland to cities. Like there's always more than one way to get to a particular city. And for a while, I talked about driving from Los Angeles to San Francisco or the other way around because everybody in California pretty much knows that you can take the scenic route, the Pacific Coast Highway, the PCH, or you can make a beeline, take the more direct path of the 5 freeway. And then after that, I switched to an even more generic example, which is the mountain, as you see in the book, the Tao of Joy Every Day. So this